Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've seen Dumbo.
Yes, we have.
The new Dumbo. I haven't seen the old one from 1941 in 20 years or more.
Yes.
But it is great, and I remember it reasonably well. I watched it a lot when I was a kid.
I can imagine.
You familiar with it?
I've seen it maybe twice.
Right.
It's not something I watched as a kid. I don't think it was in release at that time. I think Disney used to have a different pattern of releases, which is that, every 5 or 6 years, they'd re-release one of their oldies, right? And I suppose Dumbo just didn't happen in the period that I was growing up, and I never got to see it.
Oh, it was in the cinema re-releases?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, no. They would do... I remember The Lady and the Tramp coming out, and, they were big hits on re-release, right? It was like a whole generation of people hadn't seen them.
Yeah.
So,
and then in recent years, they've been doing the Disney Vault, where they release their films on DVD, but it's one at a time, and it's
right.
like for like 6 months you get to buy this, and then it's gone.
Right.
I think that I'm not that familiar with that, but I think that's the way that they kind of basically make them scarce and draw a kind of audience and market for them.
Yes. And then we talked at the beginning of the film about the lack of imagination in Disney, because this is about the 4th or 5th film that we've seen that is a live-action remake of a cartoon an animated film.
So I think it's the 3rd one that they've done. They did The Jungle Book in a big CGI production directed by Jon Favreau. They did Beauty and the Beast with Emma Watson. I haven't seen that one.
I love that, yes.
They've done this, and they are doing Aladdin, they're doing Lion King.
Okay. So,
it's bizarre to me
Beauty
that
and the Beast was lovely. It was a big hit.
Yeah.
But...
It's bizarre to me that people are ahead of time calling the new Lion King the live-action version, because from what I can tell, there's not going to be any live-action in it. It's CGI. Right. But they're going for this really very realistic CGI aesthetic, right, which they did in The Jungle Book, and they've done here. So, it's kind of bizarre to me that people are calling that live-action when it's not. It's weird sort of lack of distinction people are making. They look very. I really like the new Jungle Book, I must say, and in some ways I think it's far superior to the original, which I went back and revisited and thought there's really no.
Some of it is unwatchable.
Well, there's no story here. Like it is a collection of bits and pieces,
yes,
which are pleasant, but there's actually a story in the new one which I liked.
Yes. Though, I just love the song so much in the original.
Of course, yeah.
And those particular recordings,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
this, I think, is far inferior to the original.
It is.
And I don't think you have to remember the original all that well to get the sense of that, because even just taking on its own terms, this is not a very good movie.
I feel it's like such a missed opportunity. Actually, I didn't know that it was directed by Tim Burton. So let's make that clear. And whilst I was watching it, I was thinking, my God, this is like visually quite dazzling. Like, it's kind of, the images are beautiful and striking and expressive, and yet the film is dead, right? And that combination of having like these great images and that great cast, and it all feeling so dull.
I agree, it was dull, but I didn't feel it was visually anything spectacular.
Oh, I did notice that. I did. Yeah, the way that it begins with Colin Farrell coming back from World War One, and he's got an arm missing and so on. And, the family's pictured, against the backdrop of these posters of the era. And it just feels very striking and evocative. And,
there's certainly a lot of thought that's gone into the kind of production design. But I did feel it was...
The office of the Michael Keaton character,
Well, yeah, that's just pure Tim Burton.
I thought all of that was pretty dazzling to me. Yeah,
sure, I can get some sense of what you're talking about. I think it's underlit, though. For a lot of it, I feel like it doesn't take advantage of the production sort of design.
Yeah, especially, and I think that these films for kids or whatever, you want them to be bright, and actually this isn't. I think it's just a question of luminosity. Even if it's dark, just want it to be brighter, right? Yeah. And actually, this one isn't particularly dark in the sense that. Well, actually, that's not true. A lot of scenes are set at night, but a lot of them aren't, and it's the circus. And you expect it to be bright and colorful and so on, right? And even to darkness. So I do think there's a thing about the luminosity of the film, that you just want it to be brighter even when dark.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that kind of speaks to this very general quote unquote realistic aesthetic that they're trying to head at with these new CGI readaptations, remakes, and so on. So let's talk about just the differences in the story between this and the original Dumbo, because there are some. So the story is still about this mother elephant who gives birth to baby Dumbo, who's got giant ears, and he's a freak, and everyone laughs at him in a circus. The mother is taken away because she's trying to protect him, and she injures someone, and Dumbo has friends. So in the original, his friend was a little mouse, and in this, his friends are humans, particularly these two kids of Colin Farrell.
Yes.
And they kind of give him some confidence, and they figure out that with feathers he can fly. Weird thing going on with the feathers in this, because it's the same idea, but in the first film he held the feathers with his trunk, and in this one he inhales them, and it kind of freaked me out. I thought it was a bit weird, but they've got the same thing going on, and basically he becomes kind of a star, and then the film really starts to diverge from what the original was doing, because I think by the end of the original he basically I think he ends up a star in the end. Like that's the kind of success of the resolution, and I think he gets his mother back. Whereas in this, it's about being sold to a kind of big corporate circus, and the family's all there to help him fight, and blah blah blah. It becomes a big Hollywood.
I think it gets really diffused. The themes get really diffused. I think the kids are horrible.
Yes.
And smirky and, just not very appealing child actors. And so that's a big minus in the film. Because in a way, the other thread of the film, which I think, tries to be very progressive because it focuses on the young girl, and it's about her wish to be a scientist and not be on display as a circus performer, which is, a feminist element in the film, which is to be welcome, but it kind of, the child actress is just so terrible. And then also I think narratively it unfocuses the film. It becomes about something and about something else.
There are lots of strands.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of there's the parenting and the father children relationship strand, right. And they've lost their mother. He's come back from war without an arm, and
they get another mother at the end. Yes.
They kind of get another mother. Yeah. And obviously there's a kind of parallel with Dumbo having lost his mother and trying to get her back. You've got this thing. Lots of things are very very underdeveloped. You've got this thing about the circus ringleader. A circus owner who's played by Danny DeVito, who at the end of the film he ends up doing this kind of it's filmed like a sort of modern TV advert promo, although obviously it's set in like the mid-20s. It's kind of fun, where he's saying welcome to the new Max Medici circus, where we don't believe that any animal should be caged, and you see them letting all the animals that they previously had let them go. But you go like, okay, so that's kind of like he's learned a lesson, but there was no lesson. But where did he along the way learn this? It's like it wasn't set up that he needed to learn such a lesson.
No.
There's a thing about the mermaid and the merman, and apparently they had an ongoing thing, which I didn't see that.
No, there's so many things like that. Well, first of all, just before I forget, the first time you see Danny DeVito, I just felt joy. He was kind of dancing towards the camera, out of focus, and then he comes into focus, and you just think, oh, how wonderful Danny DeVito is, and how wonderful this is going to be. And then, thud, he's given nothing to work with, really. I thought the same with Michael Keaton. When I saw him, I thought, my God, what a marvelous look. And actually, he gives a great performance.
He plays the evil corporate circus owner.
But he's not done any favors by the film. The cutting of the film. So there are these scenes where it's obviously meant to be cut 5 seconds later or 5 seconds earlier. So you have him be almost pause to give his performance, and then you see the 5 seconds, and then he gives it, right? Which actually I think robs his performance of quite a lot of its flair.
There's something very erratic about the editing. There are conversations that have between Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito and Alan Arkin, who's this evil financier, and they're kind of all over the place. Like, you wonder what the original script looked like, because these seem to have been cut up. Very hard to follow.
I didn't think Alan Arkin was an evil financier, and I think
not evil, but
because he chooses Danny DeVito at the end over Michael Keaton and so on. So he's someone who wants something inventive to make a buck. So the evil person is the Michael Keaton character, but you're right. It's it's just not worked through enough. Really, it's kind of it feels scattered, as if there are huge chunks missing somewhere, that have been cut. Basically, that's and that might be because, I mean, the film just feels dull.
It feels very dead, as you say, and one of the reasons for that is it fails to build kind of real drama out of in the scenes that it's doing this thing which these new Disney readaptations are doing or remakes are doing, where they have a kind of relationship with the original film as opposed to being kind of remakes. They're sort of reimaginings or whatever, and they try as it's whatever kind of fucking bullshit sort of terminology they're trying to use to make it look like they're not just churning out money. And so this has a stork land on the train carriage that the mother is in right at the start, but it's not the same as in the original film where there was a whole thing about the stork. It's just there's a stork there and it flies off and it's just a reference. There's a few shots that are recreated. The mother embracing Dumbo, who's outside when she's been locked away through the train bars in the train window, that sort of thing, which they're just reminiscences of the original, and they make sense in context here. There's a story being told, but you kind of go, am I appreciating this for what it is? I'm appreciating it because it reminds me of the whole film. It's kind of a weird place to be. And then you have the circus stuff with the building that's on fire and Dumbo's supposed to put it out, and then that's where Dumbo first flies in the circus, and it's kind of great triumphant thing. But as he falls off and he's plummeting towards the ground, it should be so dramatic. And in the original film, it was incredibly heightened and scary. I remember it being incredibly scary.
Yeah.
And in this, what happens? In this, the girl says, "Fly, Dumbo."
Yes.
I mean, there's nothing. She delivers the line worse than I just did. That's it. And it happens again later on with the Indian snake charmer guy who goes, "Oh, go on, Dumbo, fly," when he's falling again. What? It's very repetitive too.
Yes, but it's not. Yeah, I was going to say it's not the actor's fault. There's a lot of things missing there. The film is not exciting. Almost none of the action scenes fill you with either fear for what's about to happen or wonder as to what eventually does happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, kind of, I think the film fails on all of that really, and there are some things that I just think are kind of really unexplainable. So, Colin Farrell is so good, but he's given almost nothing to do. There's no development there. Eva Green, why the fuck does she have a French accent? They couldn't. I mean,
I think, why does Colin Farrell have an American accent? I know they're trying to make him into this horse riding guy, and his thing is, I've lost an arm. Can I still perform in the circus, sort of thing? But it's just a very bad accent. And I wonder, why couldn't he just keep him as an Irish guy and just let it away?
That didn't bother me at all.
I didn't like him. But you're right about Eva Green as well.
But Eva Green's accent, it just feels so false and phony and put on, And I think, isn't being English exotic enough in the American fucking Midwest? Right? Or do they not think that Englishness can be sexy? What is going on there? Why the need to make her French?
Well, they definitely don't think that Englishness can be sexy. I mean, there is one English character in this who's the sort of right-hand man of Michael Keaton, who's the one who comes in and goes, "I've come here to clear my conscience. They're going to kill the mother." And it's
ablaze.
Genuinely, that line of dialogue. There are other lines of dialogue. In fact, what you're saying about the girl, the scientist thing, I remember it made me think of Shazam, because you said about Shazam, the family is kind of, it's so carefully multiracial, that family, and I didn't have that. I didn't really have any problem with that, but you picked up on it as something you felt was quite kind of forced, right? Well, I think if you think about that, then this is that, but ratcheted up 10 times, because every line of dialogue she has in the first half of the film is about, it contains the word science or experiment. I'm going to be a scientist. I want to do science. Let's do an experiment. And she might as well just be like the adverts of going, I'm going into a STEM subject.
Yeah.
It's.
I mean, all of that was just ridiculous, and actually, I think the whole. I mean, you expect Disney to be about family and so on, but this is just so forced and by the numbers, and you can see it coming from a mile away, and it feels so unnatural. As soon as Eva Green appears, she's going to be the replacement mom, right? And yet, you want to see some desire build up between Colin Farrell and her, or something, a joke, an affinity, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
not just you're structurally here to replace the mom, right?
You're there, so you'll do.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree. One thing that I would say in the film's favour, although this again, is tempered for me. Dumbo's quite cute. More than I was expecting.
I also had a problem with Dumbo because, maybe I'm being overly sensitive now, but, in a film that's CGI, out of all the colours, that you could have made the eyes of Dumbo, why did it have to be blue? Why is there that underlying Walt Disney Aryan shit going on,
Well, I suppose. Yeah. Well, they did at least do the decent thing of taking away those racist crow characters from the first one and just replacing them with just one all-purpose black guy here. No, I kind of agree, but I do think Dumbo is quite cute, and like I say, I was kind of, because I didn't watch the entire first film again, but I went back and looked at clips here and there, and there's such expressiveness to the animation and design in that first film. I kind of thought, actually, is it going to feel the same here? Like, or how is it going to feel? Because part of it is that it is so unreal, and that these characters are pure, beautiful 2D, hand-drawn animated things that you're in this. It just takes you into this kind of fantasy world, and the idea of trying to make it realistic looking, how is that going to add up with the unrealistic things that the characters are expected to do? And actually, I think the film does a lot of it very well. I think there's character and kind of feeling in Dumbo's eyes and things like that, and his movements that I think works. What I would say against that is, why is he on screen so little? I mean, that's what I'm here for. And actually, they cut away from him as much as they can.
Yeah, probably was very expensive.
But it's a huge tentpole Disney thing. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I don't want to see shots of the audience watching him.
Well, first of all, as to the cuteness thing, I agree, right? Like, he is very cute. And maybe connecting to the other thing that you said about him not being on screen enough, I also thought that he was cute, but he wasn't quite a character. I actually didn't know what he was thinking.
Yes.
Or when he was fearful, or his longing for his mom. All of the things that you actually saw very clearly in the original.
Yeah. There are things that you're told here. Other characters tell you he wants his mum, basically.
But you don't see it.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that was a problem. Like, you don't feel enough for Dumbo. Yeah. And kind of...
And when he has triumphs and when he feels lost and all that kind of thing, you're absolutely right. You don't feel for him. You see it happen, but you don't feel. But when he has these triumphs of learning to fly, of escaping and finding his mum, all that sort of stuff, you don't feel it along with him. I don't think it's emotionally affecting.
I don't. It isn't, and I think that's the reason why. Because you should be identifying with Dumbo and understanding his emotions and sharing them. Not just being told what he's feeling. So it's a problem, and it's a mess of a film, really.
There were one or two kind of funny coincidences that I picked up on at the start, related to things that we've been talking about recently. That initially kind of set my mind spinning, thinking, "Oh, what might be going on here? This is kind of interesting." So, very recently, just the other day, I told you about this film from the 1920s. In fact, let me look up when it was. This Lon Chaney film called The Unknown. 1927. This 1927 film called The Unknown, which it stars Lon Chaney, and it's directed by Todd Browning. And it's this film about this circus performer called Alonzo the Armless, who Lon Chaney plays. And he's got no arms, and then it turns out actually he does have arms, and he's hiding in the circus because if he pretends he's got no arms, he can't have committed this murder. So, and it's kind of the parallels aren't that strong, but obviously the dad character here, played by Colin Farrell, is missing an arm from the war, and there's this whole thing going on in The Unknown about how men who had come back from fighting in World War One, who would have suffered injuries and loss of limbs and that sort of thing, would have felt this the kind of losses that they felt would have been reflected in this film, but that kind of occurred to me. I thought, what might go on here? The other thing that occurred to me was, just before the film started today, we were talking about Game of Thrones. We were talking in particular about the characters of Tyrion Lannister, who's the imp, played by Peter Dinklage, who's a dwarf, and the eunuch character, Varys, I think his name is, right? And there's this thing in Game of Thrones about how it's a society it depicts that privileges physical perfection, and these two are disfigured in one way or another. You know, it's a bit unfair to call being a dwarf a disfigurement, but it's a kind of physical imperfection, right? And it's something that Tyrion is very aware of, and he privileges knowledge above all things, and he reads and stuff, which is very unusual, because he says, like, this is the way that I can this is the way that I can fight and make myself useful and all this sort of stuff and compete in this world. And Varys does very much the same sort of thing, and he's this kind of evil spying character who is again kind of on top of things all the time. And there's another element of their physical differences from everyone else, giving them a way that they can hide. Other people don't expect much of them, and so I wondered whether, immediately I start with this because it made me realise, well, that's going on in Dumbo, right? Dumbo's big ears, this kind of difference about him. Once the dad character came in and he's lost an arm, I thought there's going to be some, what can they build out of this connection between them? Then I thought there might be something with the ringleader character. Obviously, Danny DeVito is a really short guy, and I was immediately so disappointed that they didn't even seem to notice that they had these things going on. That there would be something kind of like these, like a connection they could build out of these kind of unfortunates.
And it's weird because the circus has always been a refuge for oddballs or for people on the lam, like in The Greatest Show on Earth, which is the that big hit about the circus. The central clown is actually somebody who's been falsely accused of murder and is hiding out in the circus.
Yeah.
So there should be something more about, and actually in The Greatest Showman, right?
Yes. It's about a gang of different people.
Yes, of misfits who find a home in a different kind of family.
Yeah.
Whereas actually this is very conservative. The family they find is they just parachute in Eva Green to replace the mother.
and actually another Todd Browning film Freaks, from, was it 1932 or so, which is about a freak show, and the idea in that is kind of actually the weird people, or the bad people, the ones you should be scared of, are the ones in charge of the whole thing, and actually the freaks are their own kind of misfit family, as you say.
Yes.
Like the elements all seem to be here,
but they're not pulled together.
And they just go.
And the truth is, you don't care about any of them. And some of the ideological stuff, I was really squirming in my seat, really. It's just so by the numbers. The whole thing about the family and, and reuniting them and, people finding their potential and all that crap American shit that you get all the time. I mean, it's just, without any justification, it just... Every time the girl, threw a feather at the elephant and said, "You can do it if you really want. You don't need the feather." You just think, "Fuck off."
Because it's not built out of anything. It's not. There's no depth of feeling or significance, and as I said, it's so repetitive. They keep on doing it.
Yes.
And
so let's talk a little bit about Tim Burton's career, because. He's somebody whom at one point I truly loved, all his early hits, I thought the Batman films were wonderful.
Edward Scissorhands.
Edward Scissorhands. I mean, even, what is it, Little Big Eyes or whatever it was called.
Big Eyes.
Big Eyes, the most recent one.
I've not seen that.
I found it interesting, and he's working within his quirks and so on.
It's not that recent, is it, Big Eyes?
I thought it was.
It must be 10, 15 years ago.
No.
Hold on, I will.
I think you're thinking of Go Fish or Big Fish or something like that. I think Little Big Eyes.
Big Fish was like 2004 or something.
Yes.
Big Fish was 2003. Big Eyes was 2014.
Okay, 4 years ago.
But he did Miss Peregrine since then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
Actually,
I haven't liked very much, really. I hated the... I haven't seen his Alice in Wonderland, actually. But I thought the Johnny Depp Helena Bonham Carter musical
Sweeney
Todd, left a lot to be desired. I liked was it called, Little Big Eyes, but actually I also thought
just called Big Eyes.
Big Eyes, but also I think the film didn't quite work. What else has he done?
He did.
He stopped being funny.
He did Frankenweenie. They did make a full thing of that because that was his short from back in the day. I think I never saw that.
I never saw that.
He did Corpse Bride, which I've not seen. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, I kind of.
I would revisit it because well, I mean.
So he's done actually quite a lot of musicals when one thinks about it.
Mars Attacks was fantastic.
Mars Attack was great.
Sleepy Hollow, Planet of the Apes.
I kind of like Sleepy Hollow. Planet of the Apes was kind of dull, really. Mm. I mean, that did feel like corporate filmmaking.
Ed Wood.
I love Ed Wood.
I've not seen Ed Wood. And obviously Beetlejuice, way back in...
I love Beetlejuice. And actually, I suppose this is the thing. Because he used to have a kind of a quirky, cutting, dark sense of humour. Edward Scissorhands is both moving and funny, right? I think the Batman films are funny, even though, they're quite dark, right? So, this didn't have a single joke in it.
Well, I mean, no, not really. No,
none that landed. But actually, I don't even think there was much of an attempt to inject humour into the whole thing.
No, I agree. It tried to be sort of romantic and dusty and full of feeling, and felt at that too.
Yes,
but that's what it was going for.
So he's gotten really sentimental in his old age. He's lost his edge. And actually, I think not only has he lost his edge in this, but he also seems to have lost his signature, because even though when I was saying that the film was visually, to me, kind of spectacular, really, you could see the thought that had gone into it, and the compositions were original, the images were interesting, and everything. But they weren't wonky and odd. They didn't feel like his.
No.
So that's something.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one because you can feel obviously the kind of corporate control over these remakes that Disney are doing, and I feel like in a way like Jon Favreau, who did the Jungle Book remake, is the perfect director for them because he doesn't have any style of his own.
Yes.
He just here's 2 hours of film. There you go.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It kind of works.
It kind of works, and there you go. And so when you get in a big name director who has this known sort of style and aesthetic, like Tim Burton, it's kind of a weird place to be, because how much do they restrict what they do? Are they there so that they can put their signature on it?
Yeah, it's kind of... Anyway, that's interesting, because in the sense that it was visually striking and memorable and so on, kind of... That's one of the things you remember Tim Burton for. But actually, the images weren't, gothic, dark, part of them being striking was that they were offbeat and wonky, and, kind of, they were more like German expressionists than, I don't know, kind of classic Hollywood or something. So there's none of that here,
Yeah, and this is when I was thinking back to the original 1941 Dumbo, where, like I say, I remember that, and, I've got to be honest and say I never watched the whole thing through in a long time, but I've seen bits and pieces and I remember it reasonably well, and I remember it being very heightened and very scary.
Yes.
And for instance, the Pink Elephants on Parade thing, which they redo here as a kind of bubble show, right? The whole thing about Pink Elephants on Parade in the first one was Dumbo got drunk.
Yes.
Because some champagne wound up in the water that he didn't know, and so he drinks it and he gets drunk. He basically gets high and he's tripping, and he sees these terrifying, scary elephants in the sky dancing around. Well, in this, it's redone as this as a circus show, and other people can see it because Danny DeVito makes mention of it, or Alan Arkin makes mention of it. Everyone's watching this thing, and these giant bubble elephants start dancing around in space, and you go, okay, so I don't mind that there's no context of being drunk built into it. I'm not saying it should copy.
Though that was a lovely moment in the film that's lost.
But then
in the original.
But then you are questioning, so is there magic going on? How are they doing this? I don't get it. And the effect is dampened and lost because you're questioning it, and again you're going, I remember this from the first film. Is that why they're doing it?
Well, actually, there's more than that. So first of all, I mean, how are they doing it is not even my first question. Is why are they doing it? Why hasn't the viewer been told? Kind of, it comes, that's something that must have, because they're in a hurry to get the act going, right? So kind of, and when the characters arrive in the scene and they start blowing those bubbles, it catches them off guard as well. They're not expecting that.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and so that's why Dumbo's scared, right? But actually, you don't see anything through. Well, all you see is that he's scared.
Well, Dumbo was into it. He was nodding along.
Oh, I thought he was scared of it.
No, he was totally into it. He was nodding along with the music. Again, the camera kind of keeps cutting back to him, and he's like, "Ooh, magic! I like this." You see the reflection in his eyes, and he's happy.
No, well, I read that differently. I did see the reflection in his eyes and so on, but I thought he was scared.
I know. I saw it as like a wonder.
No. I saw it as kind of, scared. And I think it jives in because they arrive at the place and it's much bigger and so on. But anyway, it kind of... My point is that, the whole drunk scene, it's almost like you're seeing it from Dumbo's point of view. He's drunk and this is how he's seeing the world, right? So kind of... I mean, here it appears and then it has an effect on him. Again, I suppose part of the same pattern that we're talking about, that really, it's not a film about Dumbo. Dumbo's not the main character, but, kind of Dumbo is the spark that makes everything else happen, right? He's a central trope, but he's not a central character.
Yeah, I honestly, it just made me think. I wish I was watching the original Dumbo, and I don't say that to say like, oh, of course everything was better back then, because. Yeah, that's not the point. Like remakes can legitimately be better than originals.
But I think
but it made me feel a longing to see it, because I remember that just being so bright and creative and heartfelt and beautiful.
Yes.
And this was just lacking all of that.
Yes, I mean, this is a film that lacks heart. It's true. I mean, and actually, it's one of the kinds of films that I hate, because it's almost like it's written in ways that nobody believes, neither the filmmakers, nor the audience. Like, you don't believe in those ideas. Nobody does. And actually, but we're all meant to, right? So it kind of is like this Baudrillardian idea of simulacrum, right? We recognize the form, we recognize its cultural value, and so on, but they don't believe it, and we don't believe it. Whereas actually with the original Dumbo, however much you might disagree with that worldview, the filmmakers believed it, really, and the audience, I think, buys into it. Whereas in this, it is like, you're doing all the right things, all the things that you're meant to do, right? You're upholding the idea of, family and family relations that our society values. But everybody knows that all those relationships are much more complicated, right? And the film eschews all of those kind of messiness, and just kind of gives you the formula. And it's really dull, and it's kind of offensive.
Offensive in the lack of thought. Or?
Well, offensive in that kind of an artist's role, or one of an artist's role, is to make you feel, to make you understand, to open up your understanding, kind of to teach you something about the world and what the world is like. And this is just like corporate and phony from top to bottom.
Has no intention of even trying
to do it. So,
yeah, I really, really didn't like it.
Anyway.
I had a very bad time. I mean, I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. It really sent me into a deep, deep maelstrom of woe.
I know, I can see your face drop.
I wasn't happy with it. And then everything just ends up on fire. Like, why does it have to get so big at the end? The entire circus collapses and ends up on fire. And it's like, I guess, that could be, if the characters in the film is developed enough, then that's like hugely melodramatic and could be wonderful. But it's not. It's just it's chaos here.
That to me, and that's been true from the 80s onwards, and maybe even before. It's a mask for a lack of imagination, right? Like, if you can't think of a good idea that will keep the audience tense or make them emotional, make them scared, just blow up something huge, or burn something huge, or as if the bigger the explosion, or the more people that die, or kind of the more intensely the audience will feel, and that's not the case at all. There's no relation between those things at all. It's just kind of a mask for a lack of artistry.
Yeah. There's one other thing which is much more minor and throwaway that annoyed me, which is in the kind of expo place. Like, this is supposed to be set in basically the mid-20s, we're thinking, post-war. and they in the corporate big New York Michael Keaton circus called Dreamland. There's a sort of scientific expo bit, and one of the things there is this diorama sort of exhibit thing
of cinema
of the future. It's of what the future could look like, and it's got that kind of it looks like an American diner in the 50s, but it's got the robot.
The cinema comes at the end,
yeah, and it's got like a flying robot that cooks you food for you and stuff, and that really annoyed me because every kind of era has had its ideas of what the future would look like.
Yes.
But what that is showing there is what the people in the 1950s thought the future would look like.
Yes.
They had no idea about these materials even in 1922.
Well, actually,
that really annoyed me. It's so out of place.
The 50s is a fetish era for Tim Burton.
Of course, yeah.
You know, so I think that was just transplanted into the 20s.
And then it has that cinema thing at the end where that's the girls. In that final kind of promo that Danny DeVito does for his new circus, he has he says and Miss whatever her name is, the girl, here's her tent of scientific wonders, and it's her showing a film, and she's hand cranking this reel, and it's of Dumbo flying with Eva Green riding him, and it's kind of interesting because it's like it is imagery that kind of picks up on those very, very early silent movies where they were just filming things because isn't it amazing we can show movement, like filming a horse galloping and that sort of thing, although this is 30 years after that, so it's like they would have, they were making silent movies by this point, but it's kind of fun sort of imagery just for that reason, I suppose. It was kind of, maybe that's another kind of fetish thing, but on this occasion I just kind of liked it. But it is similarly out of time.
It is similarly out of time because it's something that you expect to be happening, I don't know, around like 1880, 1890. And, because wasn't that also, what is it, a kinematoscope?
Yeah, it wasn't a film, was it?
It wasn't a film, it was
a revolving mirror type
thing, yeah. So that was projecting on the wall. So, so it does feel like, like some things are too early and some things are too late. Also, I think the film starts off in 1919, so, even a lot of those, like, magnificent Art Deco interiors, like, they wouldn't have been in America in 1919, so, anyway.
I guess there's a certain amount that you kind of accept. Like, it's not a film that is completely rooted in its time. You kind of accept, I think, a certain amount of of design.
You accept a certain.
But there are a couple of things that stand out.
Yeah, if the characters had engaged you, none of this would matter.
You're absolutely right.
So anyway,
it's just it's a bad movie, unfortunately.
It's a film that makes it makes Mike really annoyed and depressed, and it kind of it just left me a bit bored, really. That's all.
Very bored, yeah. All right. And I think it didn't make me angry. It made me bored.
Right.
Like I got the measure of the film immediately. Do you know what I mean? And I wasn't going, I wonder what will happen next. I wonder how more angry I'll be. I just knew what it would be straight away.
You had gauged the anger level from the beginning.
I just thought, this ain't worth the time, is it? I do wonder what it always kind of makes me think, like, what will kids make of it? Like, it's for them, This is a remake of a kids movie for kids again, and will they be bored?
Yes.
Probably. Will they find wonder in it?
I doubt it. And I'm not even sure that it's a film made for kids. I suspect it's a film made for the whole family, which is not the same thing. So.
No, anyway. If you've got kids and if they were bored by it, then let us know.
Yes. All right. On that note, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies. And we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Twitter and Facebook. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com, where you can see all the podcasts we've done and leave comments and all that sort of stuff.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.